Hi everyone, my name is Janelle. I'm the creative director here at Thirst. This is my husband Byron. He's the interim youth director, and we are on Friday. This is the last day on the week of Joy. So today we're reading Luke 12:24 through 26. This is NIV, and this is Jesus speaking. Consider the ravens. They do not sow or reap. They have no storeroom or barn, yet God feeds them. And how much more valuable are you than birds? Who of you, by worrying, can add a single hour to your life? Since you cannot do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? So Byron and I, when we were looking at this, we were just laughing. Like, Jesus says that adding an hour to your life is just this little thing. Like, so since you can't do this very little thing, why do you worry about the rest? I just love that he says that adding, like, how can you add an hour to your life? We literally have no control over that. Mm-hmm. But Jesus just calls it a little thing. So this whole section, right, Jesus is talking about, he goes in and talks about our clothes and all these different things about how we don't need to worry, right? Basically, he goes into this. He talks about how if the flowers in the field have more splendor and glory than Solomon and all of his robes, then you don't need to worry about your clothes, right? So he keeps going back to nature and these things that just happen and are taken care of day in and day out. And if that's taken care of, then why do we, who are more valuable than these things, worry about our day-to-day lives, right? Why do we worry about our bread, our clothes, all this stuff? So again, as we talked about with some of this other stuff, this is one of those things that sounds really great. And yes, I would love not to worry about that stuff, but I do worry about those things. And so when I look at this and I was thinking about, why is that? Like, what does that mean to worry? And what's blocking me? If Jesus says, I've taken care of it, what's blocking me from really actually thinking he's taking care of it? Because, I work here at the church, and there's so many people, whether it's a fellow employee or it's a volunteer, who will say something like, oh, don't worry, I'm taking care of that, or I've got that, or whatever. And you just almost forget about it because you know that they have it covered. They're going to take care of it, and you just don't worry about it. And so I was thinking about that idea of when I know that something's actually taken care of, I let it go, right? So I was thinking about, like, if I'm being held back by worry in my day-to-day life, and yet God tells us very clearly over and over again, I have this, you don't need to have it. In fact, in my prayers, I've been like, okay, God, praying about the same thing over and over again. And he'll literally be like, Janelle, we're not going to talk about this anymore, because I just will keep going back to the same thing. And so I was thinking about the idea of, like, our faith in God, right? And there are so many times when people have been healed in the Bible. And my dad is Pastor Terry. Sorry, I forget to say that. And they're always like, Janelle, people don't know who your dad is. So, but Pastor Terry was talking, this is back in November, and he was talking about that Jesus says to the lepers when he heals them, he says, one of them comes back and says, thank you. And he says, go now, your faith has healed you. And he says that line more than one time to different people. And so it's like this idea that our faith really does have an impact, right? So Jesus also talks about, like, the faith, the size of a mustard seed, in all these different places. And so I was thinking about the idea of faith, and then that being tied to our worry, because are we having faith that Jesus is going to come through? So then I was thinking about, like, how do you grow your faith,
Mm-hmm. Right. How do you grow your faith? But oftentimes, I wasn't going to answer that question.
Byron can't answer the question about how to grow your faith.
Well, no, because in my mind,
he also just doesn't worry about anything.
God. No, in my mind, I was thinking about how in my life I have found that God will ask me to step out in faith, and oftentimes when that comes to pass, or I have these moments, I feel like oftentimes I get a feeling where I'm like, okay, well, God, I'm here right now, and you're asking me to, like, move forward in my faith. But I'm comfortable here, where you're asking me to go here to the spot that I am uncomfortable in. And I am, like, one of those people where I want to, like, almost save my seat. I think of it like saving my seat. And I want to, like, cover this seat and then move on to that next seat, but, like, be safe in that moment. But I feel like God often is like, no, you got to go, no seat saving. You're going to go out into the gap, and you got to trust me in that gap. And then I will prepare that place for you. But, like, you work diligently, you do your hard work, you make sure that as the days go on, you're doing what you need to do, but then God's working and doing what he needs to do, and then he is preparing that way. And then you step out faithfully and do those things. But oftentimes to find faith, it's like, okay, you need to be in the Word, praying to God, and in a natural relationship with him. It's not like a wishing well where I can just say, this is what I hope for, God, boom, and then like think, okay, now I know I'm going to get something ridiculous, like a Lamborghini. It's like, no, like I just want to like progress forward in these areas that I'm working with God with.
Right. Well, and the idea of like stepping out in faithfulness to what God has promised you, right? Sometimes like we receive a promise from God, but that requires us to do something. A lot of times we're like, oh, I'm just waiting on God. And it's like, okay, but are you waiting on God as an excuse to stay in your comfort zone? Or are you waiting on God as in stepping out and doing things? And what I've noticed is, even thinking about the times that you felt the Holy Spirit, that like I've been present for you and I've watched you kind of feel this tug and go out and step in and into a moment with someone, right? I'm thinking about, I hope your mom doesn't mind me sharing this, but Byron's mom babysits, my mom and Byron's mom help babysit our kids oftentimes. And one time Byron came home from work and he just felt like his mom needed a hug, and he gave her a hug. And, you kind of have like that general, like 30 seconds or less, right, for a hug. And she started to let go, and Byron just kept holding her. And she ended up crying. And, you didn't know, right? But like and that's an easy one, like it's your mom, but still that was stepping out in that place. But when you step out in those places of faith and someone responds, right? Like if you feel the Holy Spirit calling on you, whether that means that you do wait on God, or he's asking you to step out and do something unique or different, or he's asking you to speak to someone that you don't feel comfortable with, or pray for someone, and later you have something comes out of that, right? Whether it's that person's response to you, or I've had this with a close friend of mine where I'll text her when I feel like the Holy Spirit just speaking to me, and I'll text her out of nowhere and just speak this stuff to her, and she'll text me back and be like, you have no idea, like I literally needed that right this minute. And those things not only help me say, okay, yes, that was the Holy Spirit speaking to me, but it also grows my faith in God. So there's this idea of stepping out in those places of discomfort and kind of not being sure also grows our faith in God. And then when we say, yes, I do know God's voice, and yes, I can trust him, and that these things are true and good and are going to come out, then that also gives me in these other places when I have that fear and that worry, that gives me that ability to say, no, I know in the past God has done X, Y, or Z. And so I know now in the future he still can. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Great discussion.
That was good.
So I have a little list there, but I would really encourage you to think about that question, that last question there with how can you deepen your faith in God? And then there's also some other questions in the devotion. So that is Friday. This is the last day. Enjoy. So I hope you guys have a good weekend, and we'll see you next week.